Hi, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. I'm Anna Wells. With me today are Jeff Franke and Ben Munson. We are the editors of manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News. We each have about 15 years of experience covering the industry. And today we're celebrating our 150th episode of this podcast.
Alex is excited. Is it the holiday spirit?
We have some sound effects this week that we're going to stop using at this point.
But he's so excited about it. Was that his secret Santa gift? You got that download for his phone?
I don't know. Anyway, each week we cover the top 5 stories impacting the manufacturing industry and discuss the implications that they have moving forward. Please subscribe to, and share the podcast if you can. You could help us out by leaving a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you'd like to email us, you can reach us at Jeff, Anna, Ben, or David, who is not here today, at IEN.com, with email the podcast in the subject line, comments, criticisms, noises. That's fine. Any of that.
Yeah.
We are live every Thursday, except for we're heading into the holiday break. So we will be off next week, but we'll see you the following week. Before we get started this week, I'd like to go over a quick word about a sponsor company. One of the long-lasting impacts of COVID-19 and the global pandemic it created has been the priority now being placed on long-term enterprise-wide planning. Join David and Jeff as they discuss Oracle NetSuite's latest white paper, The Ultimate Guide to Scenario Planning, to hear about new strategies and steps that you can use to de-risk your organization. All right, before we get started, how's everyone doing this week? 150.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it's great to be here for this occasion.
This momentous occasion. It seemed like the right time, and you didn't do it, so I did. There.
If you want him to stop, you may have to break out the mom voice. Like, if you don't stop that phone is mine.
Yeah, I have a good one of that. Yeah. So beware. I just used it, I think, actually. Alex.
Oh, wow.
Enough.
Oh.
Sounds like everyone's doing well.
We are great.
Maybe not Alex. He's in timeout. Yeah, I know. I'm excited too. It seems like just yesterday that we started this podcast, and I think we were kind of playing around when we first initiated Today in Manufacturing, and then it started to grow, and the audience was really responding. Peter, who's watching, says congratulations. Thank you so much. We're just really happy to see it grow, and
been very cool.
Having lots of fun. Yeah. So glad to be here. All right, let's kick off with our first story. Our fifth most popular story this week, Teamsters vote to authorize strike at Anheuser-Busch. Members of the Teamsters union working at Anheuser-Busch have voted to authorize a strike if a new contract agreement is not reached by February 29th. That's a real date this year. Should this scenario play out, it would mean up to 5,000 workers across 12 plants would strike. The discussions have made some progress to date. The two parties did reach a tentative agreement to end tiered healthcare and restore retiree health benefits. And yet they still need to resolve issues around wages and job security issues. Specifically, the Teamsters say that AB has ignored job protection despite 2022 revenues of $58 billion. But 2022 may have been a different environment. AB InBev reported a 10.5% revenue decline year over year in Q2. Despite this, one Teamsters leader says members are fully prepared to walk if AB doesn't get serious about negotiating a record contract. Record contract. Okay, so Jeff, let's kick off with you here. What was your initial reaction seeing this story about potentially a strike in the future?
Well, I think the unions overall have got to be really empowered right now after everything that happened with the UAW and what they were able to accomplish. And kind of, like I said, I think that really not only gave the Teamsters union here a real boost, but also the Teamsters are coming off a very successful negotiation with UPS. They were actually able to avoid a strike. They took a very similar tactic, in sort of giving this deadline and trying to get everybody prepared essentially for what could happen if the union's demands were not met, or at least there wasn't some negotiation taking place. So you've got a lot of movement there, a lot of momentum for the Teamsters to draw from. But at the same time, this is a really unique operating environment for Anheuser-Busch. We know everything that's been going on with Bud Light, and there's a lot of negative financial ramifications over the summer. They lost their spot to Modelo. They laid some people off in July. They laid off like 380 people. So there are these conflicting elements, but then you also have the parent company, AB InBev, who is really focused on maintaining these levels of profitability. I mean, 58 billion in revenues. That translates roughly to about 20 billion in profits. So they're still doing okay. But here in the U.S., I think Ben's going to talk a little bit about this. The trends are changing. We know the younger generation doesn't drink as much alcohol. They definitely don't drink as much beer. And the beer consuming public has gone away from a lot of these bigger labels to a lot more craft craft beers and specialty beers. So there's a lot of different elements sort of converging here. It's almost going to be kind of who blinks first in terms of the union or the company. I think the Teamsters are going to want to get this settled before this deadline. I really do feel like there's going to be a lot of movement after the holidays, and we'll see what happens. I would find it really difficult for Anheuser-Busch, after finally getting clear of all of the negative sentiments and everything that came out of that whole Bud Light situation, to want another sort of PR black eye with a strike. So I think both sides are probably pretty motivated to make this work.
Yeah, that they've had enough PR problems in the last year that I'm sure that they don't want any more. Ben, what do you think about AB InBev and the year that they've had, some of the impacts that we've been seeing from that?
I have some thoughts, and I'm going to talk about them. As soon as I get logged back in, my computer just kicked me out, which is kind of a famous trick it likes to pull. Whenever I'm on the podcast, it's like, oh, time to re-enter that password, huh?
Ben thinks he's so cool. Yeah. Watch this. Yeah.
I'm going to make him look very stupid.
Yeah. The problem is you need a bigger computer.
I know.
We were talking about this before we came on.
Yeah.
It just can't hold enough information in it.
It's maxed out.
It just fell asleep because it's trying to operate its tiny body with all this.
It's working so hard.
It's working so hard.
I know. It seems like when it rains, it pours, and poor Anheuser-Busch InBev is really.
Oh, he did it!
All right,
he did it,
Alex.
But yeah, all this after Kid Rock just called off the Bud Light boycott, and in the wake of last year's kind of turmoil around Bud Light, this year's, I should say, you'd think the union would be kind of holding a lot of the cards here, right? But Anheuser-Busch InBev is a huge multinational company, and I was just reading today, it was a Bernstein analyst, Trevor Sterling, kind of pointed out to Yahoo that reach should kind of help insulate the company from domestic disruptions. And in the summer when the Bud Light thing was really kind of going in full swing, the company still maintained its sales forecasts for the year because it was confident that the business in China would help offset anything happening here due to the boycott. So it's also worth noting that Anheuser-Busch has about 19,000 workers at its U.S. breweries, which means a Teamster strike would only represent about a quarter of that total workforce. So you'd think, you pointed out the momentum for the Teamsters recently, and that I'm sure that will play a role, but it seems like Anheuser-Busch has some things going for it here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think that context is important to point out about this is not necessarily going to be crippling. It's obviously very facility and product line dependent. But yes, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. I think that we can thank the UAW for emphasizing words like record, contract, because this is to me evidence that this verbiage is spreading. Maybe this expectation is spreading that that these unions are looking for leverage here. Does every union have the same amount of leverage in every circumstance? Probably not. But I will say I have been kind of waiting for the moment for union demands to really get like slapped back for these big pushes. And especially as the economy softens, we haven't really seen that yet. We've seen a lot of solid deals come through for workers in a lot of different segments. So I feel like if you're any unionized workforce, you really you have to try. You have to really put that out there and just see what you can ask for and see what they'll do. I don't know if they'll be as successful with sales continuing to decline, but I agree with Ben. Like, there's a lot happening at AB and Bev. It's not, the U.S. media talked a lot about this Bud Light boycott, but as we've discussed ad nauseum on this podcast before, there are a lot of other factors in play. So I think that took people put a little bit more emphasis on that specific component of the decline, when I don't think that was all of it. So it will be interesting to see if this means longer negotiations or...
It just seems like they've developed this template, which is sort of this pre-strike almost. Hey, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
This is the deadline. I mean, it didn't work out so much for UAW, but it definitely did again for UPS. So it'll be interesting.
Exactly. And I just feel like they have to push a little and find out. They don't have, why wouldn't they?
It used to be kind of a thing where you developed a really kind of strong loyalty toward a light beer. And I think younger generations are definitely not doing that. It's like you have to choose. Are you Bud Light or Miller Light, right?
Yeah, less
or
filling or tastes great. You have to choose. Remember that ad campaign, anyone?
Yes.
Less filling, tastes great? Okay.
Yeah, so maybe they're not pumping out like Bud Light loyalists like they used to. So
I don't think they are. I don't think those like macro beers are, well, statistically, this is true. They're just not as popular with younger generations. They drink less, as Jeff pointed out. They're more interested in craft beer and like maybe locally produced type stuff. It's just more of the generation's entire vibe. So I don't know. It's a lot to get around. Yeah. All right. So our next most popular story, when I first saw this headline, I had no idea what it meant. So we'll try to elaborate on that for you. Insect Shield accused of falsifying Army uniform testing. So the U.S. Department of Justice has announced a new complaint against a company called Insect Shield and its late founder, Richard Lane. The company manufactures insect-repelling clothing and chemicals, offering colorless and odorless protection against many varieties of pests through 70 launderings. The DOJ says many manufacturers approved to produce Army uniforms use Insect Shield's repellent on those uniforms. And while Insect Shield was required to test to ensure compliant levels of the repellent were applied, the DOJ says the company falsified these tests in order to hide test failures. Methods included combining results, switching labels, testing fabric samples, and performing unauthorized retests. The resulting allegation was that not enough repellent had been applied to make the uniforms effective. Lane was the company's founder until he died in an auto crash in 2022. The suit is pursuing claims against his estate as he was majority owner until his death. Jeff, walk us through a little bit about what is happening here with Insect Shield.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. This is a situation where if you go to their website, they sell a ton of clothes. And I'm sure when they applied this repellent, which actually is pretty commonly used. I mean, it's used on like dogs' flea collars. It's used in a lot of lice treatments. So it's definitely got workable applications that have been very successful.
Yeah.
So I think when you take that and you apply it to clothing and you sell that clothing, the consistency of it can wane a little bit. The consumer expectations are different than when you try to validate something for the U.S. military. Okay, there you need to show consistent data that this works at this type of level, and that the soldiers can then have confidence in it. I think Ben's going to talk about some of the different areas that they were using these uniforms in, but I think that's where this company got caught up in terms of really that new expectation or level of performance that was anticipated here that they just couldn't meet. And that led to a lot of what is assumed to be right now bad behavior. Okay, just to put it plainly, I guess.
Yeah.
The other thing that you think about here is this is $63 million in clothing deals. And it doesn't just affect Insect Shield. It affects those other military suppliers they were working with.
For sure.
So not only does it damage their reputation, it also hurts all of those other companies that were sourcing from them to fill these contracts. So there's a lot to unwind here from a supply chain and sort of accountability perspective. that if all this comes out that they were indeed falsifying these tests and doing all this stuff wrong, they hurt a lot of people here, especially the soldiers. I think one of the things that this speaks to too is right now we have all of this traceability within all the different technologies within manufacturing. And we always look at that as being able to find something that we didn't know was bad. Well, in this issue, a lot of that technology and that software is also going to help the whistleblowers basically point a very easy arrow at this is what they did. We had this data. It's right here. This is how they changed it. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see how that dynamic, that buzz term that we talk so much about, kind of came full circle here too, and sort of really pointing out the downfalls potentially of what this company was doing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Jesse, who's watching us live, said, how do they think they would get away with that? Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, when you look at some of the follow-up reports on this case, it seems like it was a little bit of a clown show in terms of how they were conducting these tests, how they were responding to the data.
There was nothing off limits in terms of what they would change, adjust, alter, modify, pick your word. I mean, It was everything that they were switching around.
It was crazy. They quoted somebody from the company, and this is not a perfect quote, just to summarize, but something along the lines of when they would get results that were off, they didn't understand why they were. And he said that didn't help us, so they just didn't share those results with, I mean... Yeah.
They would actually mix results around in terms of, well, this didn't work here, but it did work here, so let's just bring that over and make this test look better. I mean, it was a hodgepodge.
It was a hodgepodge, and it was ridiculous. And I think, Ben, part of me, we want to laugh about it because it's like a little bit of a clown show. But at the same time, I think it's important to emphasize actually the importance of this particular chemical and how it was used.
Right. Yeah. Like if you set aside everything else, it sounds like it's just a minor inconvenience. Like your clothes don't have an invisible shield against insects. That's okay. Most clothes don't. But the fact of the matter is that's what they promised, and that's what they were contracted to deliver. And a lot of these uniforms were on soldiers who are deployed in regions where insects carry pretty serious stuff, viruses like Zika or maybe Lyme disease, right? And those are very unpleasant. I would say bordering on pretty serious.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't want Zika. I could tell you right now. And Lyme disease, it can cause some pretty significant medical problems like nerve pain or facial palsy, which is basically just like, facial paralysis kind of, which nobody wants. And I really think if you believe that your uniform is actually covered in an invisible defense shield from insects, then maybe you won't be as careful as you would be otherwise. And so you're almost, normal stuff that you would do to protect yourself from, bug bites or whatever. Yeah. Maybe you don't do. And so, this turns into a really kind of negligent action on Insect Shield's part.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. They talked about I did also read this article in Task and Purpose. It went into a lot of interesting detail about how this product actually came about. And Richard Lane filed a patent for it at one point, invented this chemical formula because soldiers were being asked to apply this repellent on their own in the field. And it was just, there was instructions on how to do it properly. But, you have to think like those circumstances, how challenging that would be to actually make sure that everyone was doing it in a consistent way. And they said soldiers were getting Lyme's disease. And so if you think about now, here comes this person with a solution for that, but the solution is not effective because their quality control methods are suspect, then that's really disappointing. The money aside, And so you think like, when I first read this, I was like, okay, they're going after the estate of a dead man. Is this overreach? But I really, the more I read about it, it's such a risk, as you mentioned, for these folks that are out there, making the ultimate sacrifice to be out in the field, God knows where. And then I just think that the DOJ has to send a message. They have to be able to say, like, if you're going to put soldiers at risk, you're going to be caught. The money is going to be clawed back. We don't care if it's an estate. Like, there's millions of dollars to reappropriate back to make good on whatever that contract fraud was, and that needs to happen.
Yeah, I think that same report, they estimated like millions of uniforms were kind of delivered through this contract, and that just seems like it's just such a massive amount of faulty products that they pushed through because they didn't want to do the proper testing, or they just didn't want to face like whatever the redevelopment cycle would have been like to actually make the product work.
Well, and what they were applying there is kind of tricky because although it's commonly used, it's in the right amounts, right? So that it is safe. It can be carcinogenic potentially if you overdo it. So that's the line they were walking here. You were mentioning Lyme disease as well. I mean, my daughter had Lyme disease 6 years ago. She's still feeling the effects. So that is a very serious situation when you're dealing with Lymes. Even some of this lesser stuff, when they talk about, scabies and chiggers and all that kind of stuff, bring those back to the barracks. It's not just one person who's going to be affected. I can speak to that one personally. So, this was
scabies
much further.
No thanks.
Further reaching than you just think on the surface.
Yeah, good point. All right, our third most popular story, the EPA could soon ban chemicals used to make plastics. The EPA revealed that it would begin the process of prioritizing toxic chemicals used to manufacture and process plastics under the Toxic Substances Control Act. The year-long process could result in the agency initiating risk evaluations that could result in outright bans. The 5 chemicals in the EPA's crosshairs are, acrylonitrile,
Sorry, Miss David,
benzanamine, MBOCA, vinyl chloride, vinyl chloride and acetaldehyde, which are used in many manufacturing processes but have been associated with dangerous health risks, including cancer. They are typically used in the making of plastics, paints, coatings, resins, dyes, and other chemicals. Vinyl chloride recently made news following a colossal train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, where a host of environmental and human health concerns have arisen after the chemical was vented and burned. While the EPA says it expects to designate these chemicals as high priority for risk evaluation, it would also incorporate input from the public and chemical companies throughout the process. Jeff, what are your initial thoughts on this process that's shortly to be underway?
Well, it's interesting. They brought up the derailment to that Norfolk Southern train, and we talked a lot about East Palestine, how it impacted that one in particular business. But really, the other thing to think about, and just you don't want to be too pragmatic about it because the safety concerns are obviously paramount here. But if you look at it from just a cost perspective here, right now that derailment is up nearly to about $1 billion in just cleanup costs for Norfolk Southern right now. And they still don't know exactly the extent that it's gotten into the underground water supply, how it's going to impact consumer water supply, all of that. So even if you're looking at these and thinking about, man, what if they ban this? What are we going to do in terms of replacing it? Think about what it would cost when this stuff spills or gets out into the environment and the impact that it has, just purely from a cost perspective. Again, I think Norfolk Southern would be able to speak to that pretty strongly. The other thing is when we look at these bans, and this is going to be a process, right? They're going to be looking at this for about a year, and then they're going to figure it out. You can't just ban something like that and then not offer alternatives. So I think that's got to be a big part of what they also come out with here. They need to say, look, you can't use this anymore, but here's some stuff that you might want to look at or consider. You also wonder how that's going to lead into some of these 3D printing technologies that we've looked at. A lot of those resins are going to be safer. Does that provide a substitute? Does that provide a new technology to implement when you're looking at creating a lot of these materials that these chemicals are used in? And I think lastly, the big one here is probably the vinyl chloride. This is the key ingredient in like PVC pipe. Okay. So this has huge far reaching effects. And if you do take this out of the equation, you take vinyl chloride just in and of itself, that's great that we're going to do something here. What about China? What about India? What about some of these other countries that have a history of not being as environmentally sensitive? Are they going to become then sort of the breeding grounds for the use of these chemicals and taking away some of those opportunities, manufacturing opportunities for U.S. businesses if we don't have something to replace them? So I'm all for being safer and smarter and all that stuff, but we need to also use some of these government resources to point out solutions as well.
Do you think there's actually a safe alternative to some of these chemicals? Or is there maybe something that's at least safer that could be used until like, you know, the public is, you know, called to attention by another train derailment or another situation where it's like vinyl chloride is bad.
I think there probably are options out there, but that's when cost comes into play. I think there's also a lot of processes that are going to need to be redefined with different materials to produce the same type of performance capabilities. That's where it gets hard. But that's where also I think a lot of these regulatory agencies fall down and people lose faith in them because they're very good at pointing out what's wrong. Look, vinyl chloride, I mean, they've known that's a carcinogenic for 50 years. I mean, we know that can be bad stuff. It's like anything else. When it gets into the wrong place in the wrong quantities, it's horrible. But we've been able to figure out how to use it safely, so it hasn't been brought to the forefront until we have a disaster like this. And there's so much conversation about plastics right now too, which is positive. But we also, again, need to lean into some of these resources for finding solutions. I think that's where people get frustrated too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there has to be an alternative, and we'll see what they come up with there. It sounds like, Ben, there is a lot of resources and maybe an overarching theme to what is happening here in terms of what the Biden-Harris administration is doing.
Right. I think that this review kind of falls underneath the Biden-Harris administration's cancer moonshot mission, which I often think of in medical terms, but there's also a huge like proactive or preventative piece to it as well. And the EPA, so they're reviewing this, and it's kind of within their purview, and they've dedicated a lot of money to accelerate cleanup at kind of previously underfunded sites, and they've also committed a lot of money to replace lead pipes and service lines, and that includes efforts to, but that's, you know, about protecting families from so-called like forever chemicals, things like that, and so. When there's like this derailment and we still don't know the full scope of what this spill is gonna mean for that part of Ohio, right? It's then all of a sudden it falls within this kind of cancer moonshot mission, and it becomes an important part of not just curing cancer, but preventing it altogether.
No, that's the interesting connection. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think definitely that's part of it. And to me, I would say if you're looking at any kind of silver lining for the whole Ohio train derailment, like maybe this is it, because in the U.S. there's so little regulation around chemicals. We know that, right? There's additives in consumer products that are banned in many other countries, and you don't hear a lot of pushback about these lax policies because I think people don't know. And whether that's willful ignorance, that's, you know, your perspective, but I think it's the truth. Or they make assumptions that due diligence has already been done. And otherwise it wouldn't be on the market, right? But in many cases, that's not really what's happening here. So I think when you see a big colossal disaster like this take place and then the spotlight is on it, it's a very easy time for a federal administration or a group to say, hey, we're looking at this, because they do tend to get stymied by business. I mean, I will say I have some concerns about what happens when they take the input of the chemical manufacturers, because of course that's going to muddy the waters, but hoping for some positive outcomes. And I'm hoping there, to your point, Jeff, about finding a replacement, maybe that conversation is, yeah, we can do it a different way, but it costs us this much more. How are you going to help us with, tax breaks or incentives to like shift that production in a different direction, like they did with automotive, right? So, so it'll be interesting to see how this goes, but I do think that it is positive, because I think in the U.S. we've become so conditioned to feel like we have to trade, that we have these heavy trade-offs for this is just the cost of doing business. If we want these jobs, then we have to deal with the runoff and the cancer risk and the pollution and things like that. Like, I think we need to get our heads around the fact that if we work together on this, I'm sorry, this sounds very pie in the sky, but like we can do better.
Well, I think
we can do better.
Well, I think a lot of it too is education. I mean, it is like what you mentioned. There's an awareness of when I buy PVC pipe to fix something around the house, I'm not thinking about the process that was used or the materials involved.
Right.
In that. But when you educate people, and we do have a history of this a little bit, I mean, these are kind of extreme cases, but we switched from leaded paint when we understood what was going on there. Mm-hmm. We no longer use asbestos for, insulating our homes and doing things like that. So we have been able to shift and pivot from some of these huge infrastructural norms, if you will, in creating better materials. That is sort of part of the ongoing dynamic of U.S. manufacturing. Whenever we're on other podcasts and we talk about, well, how is manufacturing going to solve these problems? We have a history of doing this. So there are answers and there are solutions out there. Part of it is educating folks, and part of it is having these hard conversations. They're not focused solely around, man, now you're taking something else away from me. Also being part of the solution. And also, again, showing some of this ROI. Okay. I know it's difficult because people want to focus on, and everybody should just want to do the right thing and have altruistic motives and stuff. Well, it's safer. It's better for the environment. Just go through some of the financial elements of this and what it ends up costing you when something bad happens. I mean, we talk about that on the podcast a lot. Yes. And I think maybe that can be a bigger tool or another tool to help people change behaviors.
Yeah. Got to have a carrot and a stick, right?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Seth, for weighing in about our 150th episode. He is excited. He said, let's go. And we will, man. All right. Our second most popular story this week, rope failure causes $5 million in damages. Another preventive maintenance disaster on a ship. It's becoming a theme on this podcast. We've done a few of these. In 2022, a cargo ship called Thorco Basilisk was offloading part of a wind turbine at Greensport Terminal in Houston when a hoisting rope broke on the ship-mounted crane, causing the part to fall and damaging the ship and the part to the tune of $5 million. The NTSB said that the rope was at fault. The agency said it showed significant external corrosion and wear that were obscured by grease. And despite annual surveys of the rope, the problems just weren't visible due to the grease buildup. The rope was less than 10 years old, the window for normal usage, but the company has now changed its maintenance program to mandate ropes be discarded after 5 years. The report says diligent inspection, maintenance, and management of wire ropes are essential, in part due to corrosion risk posed by salt water and humid air. They went on to say that working wires should be changed at recommended intervals or more frequently depending on operating conditions and use. Let's start with Ben on this one. Tell us a little more about your take on this crappy rope.
This is, I mean, these stories are kind of fun. It's like, oops, look what you did. But
look what you did. Nobody died. All right.
Yeah. I do. And I really think it's funny. The issue with not being able to see through the old grease buildup. Wow. That just seems like a lazy excuse. It kind of reminds me of when I'm at home and my daughter can't find something in the fridge, but hasn't moved anything also.
So
it's
right.
Like, is it maybe behind the stuff in the front? But it just seems like common sense. If the blob of grease on the surface seems normal, that doesn't necessarily suggest everything underneath the grease is normal as well. Yeah. So, it's funny that all this happened because of the grease buildup. But to the ship's credit, it has made some kind of major changes to its maintenance program, and it's reduced the service time for wire ropes from 10 years to 5 years. And I think, to be fair, I think everybody gets complacent from time to time. And it's just that for a lot of us, like, if I half-ass,
oh, man.
Never invited back.
Wow.
But if I do a bad job, it doesn't always result in like millions in damages and an embarrassing investigation from a federal agency,
That's true.
So if that was hanging over my head, I would wipe away the grease. I would be like, I don't want to be on this podcast.
Yeah.
Someone's going to laugh at me.
Like, how heavy is a wind turbine? I'm going to guess heavy. So, the stakes are a little bit higher than you think.
Is that a scientific guess? Heavy?
Heavy.
Yeah.
That's what they weigh. Jeff, what did you think about not just the incident, but also the response?
A couple things. I mean, first of all, even before this happened, 10 years is the acceptable life. Like that just doesn't seem right. When you're lifting heavy all the time, it just seemed that just seemed off. I mean, for something like a wire cable rope, I don't know. So I was surprised that was an acceptable sort of SOP. You would have thought I would have thought that'd be like an annual change out type thing. Okay. I don't know. But so that was surprising. And it's good to know that they basically cut that in half. Now it's every 5 years, regardless, they got to switch them out, which is a positive step.
Yep. And you got to look under the grease too.
You got to get into the grease.
Get in there.
Yeah.
No matter how old the grease is, you got to get in there.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's interesting, they point out the damages at $3 to $5 million. We know it's more than that. And again, getting into this, I don't want to beat this to death, but like that whole ROI conversation, this is the stuff we can reinforce even at the maintenance level as well. 3 to 5 million just talks about the damages that were done. That's not the downtime from everybody on the boat, the time that was lost for them staying there longer to fix the situation, what they may have lost in picking up extra cargo, all of that downtime, all that time, all the repairs. It was more than that. And I think that has to go into some of these conversations when folks are just rushing so hard to get stuff done in any environment. This is also, I think, kind of an interesting example of how something at the top level comes down and sort of impacts at maybe the lower level. We look at this big push right now for all these renewable energy resources, which I'm not bashing. Okay. I'm not saying it's leading to horrific accidents on cargo ships.
See what happens when you use wind energy, says Jeff.
I was going to say,
not my point.
They're like the wind power opponents are like, yep,
this is
I
the
knew
problem.
This was going to happen. Yeah.
We have this push and sort of this rush to get a lot of these things in place. Well, on a cargo ship, they know they got to move, they got to get it up, they got to get going. That can lead to some of these issues, especially when we look at all the stuff happening on cargo ships right now, because we know there's supply chain strain right now on everything.
Yes.
So it all sorts of bleeds together, and you can see how these things impact.
Yes, definitely. Seth says that he agrees with Jeff. 10 years to replace the cable seems like asking for an issue.
All right, Seth.
I think we all agree there. To me, what was concerning...
Anna disagrees. She's like 20 years.
Do it. 50. Don't ever look at it.
Push the limits.
Just keep going. Yeah.
Well,
100.
No. What I don't get really is even looking at it in terms of like a frequency interval. Like it's great that they shortened that in half to 5 years, but at the same time, this was within the established window of time that it should have been operational, and it wasn't. And the only way you would know that is by looking at it.
Yeah.
So like to me, it was like, I mean, this catastrophic event could also go undetected at a 5-year interval. That's like not the way to approach it, in my opinion.
Especially when you're lifting something that is tons. I mean, this isn't a couple 100 pounds here. This is,
I think that you can't fully view the health of the device. Then you have to make some other changes, not just like, well, let's just less time, use it for less time.
Fine.
Should be fine at 5.
Yeah.
We thought it'd be fine at 10. It wasn't. Okay, that's on us. Should be fine at 5. Alex is trying to show me some details here on what wind turbine weighs. Oh, okay. Blade assembly, 36 tons.
Whoa.
Nacelle, 56 tons. Tower itself, 71 tons. Total weight of 164. I think this was a blade assembly.
Yeah.
36 tons. That's heavy.
That definitely fits the scientific qualification.
Yeah. Just like we thought.
Yeah, it was defined
heavy
adequately, I would say.
Nailed it.
All right, moving on to our top story of the week. I'm not surprised that this was number one because every story about U.S. Steel for the last couple months has gotten a ton of traffic from our audience. This time, the dramatic will U.S. Steel be acquired story has come to a conclusion, it looks like. So Storied U.S. Steel to be acquired for more than $14 billion by Nippon Steel. After months of speculation over its fate, U.S. Steel announced it had made a deal with Japan's Nippon Steel to be acquired for $14.1 billion. The price tag is nearly double what was offered just 4 months ago by rival Cleveland Cliffs, and the combined company will be in the top 3 steel companies worldwide. Some are saying top 2. U.S. Steel CEO David Burritt says he believes the tie-up will increase competition and that it offers a low level of risk. U.S. Steel will retain its name and its Pittsburgh headquarters and will operate as a Nippon subsidiary. Currently, steel producers in China are responsible for more than half of the global supply, but U.S. Steel's domestic plants with blast furnaces are said to be vital to the American auto industry supply chain. Nippon President Eiji Hashimoto said that the company is committed to honoring all of U.S. Steel's existing union contracts. Nippon has had a presence in the U.S. for almost 40 years. This deal is expected to close in mid-2024. Jeff, I think the deal was a little bit more contentious than this article maybe made it seem. What do you know about that situation with how this is being received in the market?
Well, I think it's interesting. So first of all, just looking at how this affects U.S. Steel, I think it's a very positive thing because you're getting a big company, a much larger company with a global footprint who can bring in new technologies and new efficiencies to help this company grow. U.S. Steel we covered the legacy of it in the past. At one time, employing over 100,000 people. It was the first billion-dollar company in the world. I mean, all of these things, and it's fallen by the wayside because for a lot of reasons, you talked about the blast furnaces, and that's huge for automotive manufacturers. But in a lot of other cases, that's just an archaic technology. A lot of these new steelmakers are using arc furnaces, which are more energy efficient, they're cleaner, all of that kind of stuff. So when you're looking at bringing in a new larger company, they should be able to make some investments to help U.S. Steel catch up and be a bigger player. So I think it's positive in that way. They've also said they're going to honor all of those union contracts, which should offer some peace of mind to a lot of those workers. But it hasn't. And this is the part where I'm still a little confused. Maybe you guys can help me out because a couple of congressmen, especially this one really caught me. This one was from Chris DeLuzio. He's a Democrat out of Pennsylvania. And he says that this is bad for the country. It's bad for the folks in Western Pennsylvania, and said it was really, a punch in the gut, which I don't understand. U.S. Steel has been pretty open about being for sale for what? Since at least this spring, okay? So that was surprising. The other thing I don't understand is a lot of the backlash over this having security concerns. Japan's an ally. This isn't China. This isn't Russia. This isn't Korea. This is a trading partner of ours. This is also a company we just concluded a $3 billion deal to send them a bunch of Tomahawk missiles. So I don't understand the security concerns that people are raising there with Japan. I also don't understand how. I get that the union is not crazy about this, but the union rep came out and said we were not consulted. Man, read the paper. Okay, you knew this was going on, and they don't have to get your approval. Maybe the communication process could have been clearer in terms of what U.S. Steel's intentions were, but I think everybody understood this was going to happen. And although Nippon may look at some of these facilities that are still using some of this older technology and they're dirtier and they're not as efficient, I can't really see them looking to reduce their footprint in terms of in the U.S. when this is still the biggest steel consuming or steel purchasing country in the world. So there's still a lot of reasons for them to want to continue operations here in the U.S. to help grow their global footprint, which is what their president said is their overall goal here in becoming a more dynamic company with Nippon. So I think it's a very interesting move. It's a very positive move for everyone involved, and I think a lot of this criticism just has a lot of political sort of colors painted on it that are more about individuals as opposed to the overall picture.
I agree. I mean, the national security thing has been a red herring that politicians have been throwing out a lot the last couple of years. That's been a little bit, I think, misallocated. And I think really, if I had to guess, all these senators they were in the Cleveland Cliffs camp probably. That's a company that's right in their backyard, essentially. But if you look at the difference between those two offers, maybe they could have worked Cleveland Cliffs up a little bit, but this was double the amount. It was interesting to watch too, the Steelworkers Union, like the union called the decision greedy and short-sighted initially. They urged regulators to scrutinize this deal under, again, national security reasons. I think that the union is flexing a little bit there. Maybe just like hey, we're here, we have some expectations. Because while Nippon says it will honor those existing union agreements, the Washington Post pointed out that the union ratified a 4-year deal in 2022 that states that a new labor contract must be agreed upon before an acquisition can be completed. So that they could bring, new demands to the table potentially. So maybe this is foreshadowing from them that they might, try to push for something more than just honoring the contracts. So I do think we'll see a little bit more, I don't know, up and down there. I'm not sure that that's quite resolved. Ben, what did you think about this deal?
Well, I'm curious, do you think that the really performative politics around the announcement have anything to do with the name of the company, U.S. Steel? Do you think if it were named something different, maybe it wouldn't? And is this what's drawing a lot of these people out and making these sort of kind of intense?
I think that definitely plays a part. I mean, that is one of those, regardless of perceptions, or the realities, I should say. The perception is, man, that's U.S. Steel. That's a foundational type company.
Yeah.
When the reality is that's not the case anymore. What is it, like number 5 in the U.S., I think, as far as steel companies go?
Okay. Yeah. No, I totally agree, Ben. I think that's a great point because it makes an excellent soundbite for whatever you want to criticize. Like, well, U.S. Steel isn't even owned by U.S., not even a U.S. company anymore. Like, okay, but it's complicated, guys. Like,
but I think, just your points about the deal, they all seem positive. So it seems right now that investors are kind of more worried about the deal being delayed rather than blocked altogether. And according to Reuters, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States is going to have a difficult time finding justification for blocking the deal, but it may extend its review just to appease the critics and make it look like they're really scrutinizing this deal. And so it may not be finalized until the second or third quarter of next year, but it sounds like it'll probably go through. There's just not enough there to.
Well, the other thing I read too, the guy who runs Nippon, I mean, he took over a company that was losing billions of dollars and transitioned it to a company that made $5 billion last year. So that should also be something that a lot of those steel workers are looking at should look at as a positive potentially. Yeah,
I agree. It just we've talked about U.S. Steel before, but this is a company that was really having a lot of problems. Their only choice really at this point was to sell itself to somebody who could operate. I mean, if they can be absorbed and operate as a subsidiary, still keep their name, still stay in Pennsylvania, still operate many of these blast furnace plants that we didn't know would survive, then you got to be taking issue with something else, and that's the buyer specifically. And I do think some of these U.S. politicians are just angry that it wasn't Cleveland-Cliffs.
Yeah.
But what do you do? All right. So before we move on, we're going to take a quick word once again from our sponsor. One of the long-lasting impacts of COVID-19 and the global pandemic it created has been the priority now being placed on long-term enterprise-wide planning. Join David Manti and Jeff Franke as they discuss Oracle NetSuite's latest white paper, The Ultimate Guide to Scenario Planning, Strategies and Steps to De-Risk Your Organization. That is available at the link below. You can go ahead and click if you want to check that out. I know that everyone's got some free time coming up, I think, for winter break. So you don't have to get out of your pajamas to click that link and download. All right. So moving on to the part of the podcast that is called In Case You Missed It. But this week we determined, since we all have a lot of stockings to stuff and trying to tighten this up this week, that if you missed it, you missed it. I'm sorry to tell you that. It's kind of on you. At this point that there's a lot of content on our website. You just go there and look at it, okay? But I promise in 2024, in case you missed it, we'll be back.
We'll return.
It will. So with that being said, I know that last week there was a contest underway. Unfortunately, David had sort of unexpectedly be away this week. So I'm going to let him resume the competition stuff when he is back, because I'm not privy to I don't even know what the answer is, to be honest with you.
David, we were talking about the Zika virus before. He's got something flowing through his household right now. He's doing God's work and taking care of his family.
He really is. He
definitely wanted to be here, but he's tending to more important stuff.
Yes, but David will be back in the new year, refreshed and hopefully everybody better. Okay, so, with that being said, guys, kind of a quick wrap up here, but moving on to our final thoughts. I just want to say quickly that, I'm looking forward to some time off in the next week and a half. We'll be out of touch, really, between Christmas and New Year's. And I plan on really taking full advantage of that. So if you do email the podcast, just wait. I'll get there. I'll get there.
We know how Anna feels about emails, but
yeah,
she will get to it.
I do read them, but not with the same voracious love for email that Jeff has. So maybe email Jeff, because he'll email you back
Well, he can fit a ton of emails in his laptop.
So many.
Huge
Look at this
laptop.
thing. Yep. You can.
It's
so
got
many
so much
emails.
space. Yeah, so send them there.
Yes.
Yeah, love it.
There's a place for those emails to reside in Jeff's laptop, and he'll get back to you Christmas Day. He's going to be just so pleased. That's Jeff's Christmas wish to get.
Well, it's like we're going to wrap his laptop.
All those unopened emails, they're like Christmas cards.
Yeah. Peter says, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you, Peter. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. And to all of our viewers and listeners, we really appreciate your support this year, and we love to hear from you, so please keep in touch. Ben, what's your final thought this week?
I think we already pointed out that we're going on holiday break, and I'm pretty excited to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of disappointed about another year without a white Christmas. And I actually saw we're going to get a thunderstorm, maybe.
Yeah, a wet Christmas.
Yeah, so it's going to be kind of a wet and gross Christmas. And maybe if it's bad enough, we'll have to go to the basement and stay away from windows. So it sounds really peaceful, and I'm kind of excited. No, I'm disappointed, and I'm saddened.
What show are you going to binge during the holiday break?
I was going to finish A Murder at the End of the World.
I've heard that's really good.
Yeah, it's not bad. I watched The OA, which the creators of this show, that was a show they made for Netflix, and it lasted for 2 seasons. It was super weird, and then they just stopped making it.
I had a hard time with that one, with The OA.
Yeah.
I could not get into that one, but
I liked it, and I like the show, but I haven't finished it yet. So
yeah,
no spoilers.
Jeff, what is your final thought this week?
First of all, I just want to think about David and his family. I'm sure they'll get through their bout with whatever bug they're dealing with, but thinking about them. Also, so you mentioned this is our 150th episode. Mm-hmm. So we work with a third party, a vendor, a software provider that basically takes all the wonderful things that Eric and Alex do. Once we create the podcast, we put it together. And basically this software allows us to convert it so we can distribute it to all the different other podcast platforms. So whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Overcast, wherever, that's what this partner of ours does. And they recently sent us a recap. And usually this is stuff we just kind of share internally. And I'm not trying to give backhanded compliments to us, because what I really want to do is thank our audience for, I've said it before, I've never been involved with something like this where we get so much feedback from the audience, so much positive input. It's amazing. And this software company that we work with, this partner, basically hosts and distributes hundreds of thousands of podcasts, okay? Just all over the place. So the Today in Manufacturing podcast recently came in the top 10% of all podcasts that this platform hosts and distributes. So this isn't in the top 10% of manufacturing. This isn't in the top 10% of supply chain. This is in the top 10% of everything that they do. And just can't thank our production folks enough. Ben filling in, Andy filling in throughout the time. Everything we've done here to reach this level of engagement, we couldn't do it without you guys. And, in the spirit of the season, definitely just want to say thank you so much and appreciate everything that you do. Guys, this last year, this podcast was listened to and downloaded in 97 different countries.
What?
That's crazy.
That's like all of them.
all the countries.
So again,
seems like it.
Just looking at these metrics and the performance, it's super cool, and we're just really, really grateful to everybody listening. So thanks for that.
I would echo that we do really appreciate that. Jessie's here with us live. She says, "Happy holidays, IAN team." Thanks, Jessie. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays, and Ryan too.
And to everyone in 97 countries. The rest of the countries, though, no. Only the people.
Only the original 97.
Only the 97 that are listening.
Yeah, let's make a list.
And I will rank them. All right. Well, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Please make sure to like the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you can, sign up for our newsletters. Any way you want to engage with us further, we have lots of ways. Or send Jeff an email.
Please.
Email the podcast in the subject line. That'll help us weed out the good ones. All right. Thanks to everyone this week. Happy holidays. Enjoy your time off. Enjoy the silence. Enjoy your families. We'll see you soon.